and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Up next in the studio, I'm joined by UBP's Chief Economist, Patrice Gautry, to discuss the Swiss economy. Patrice, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You're most welcome. Now, let's start with that Swiss GDP figure, which came out last week, up 2% for the first quarter. While analysts had estimated higher, this growth still remains above that of its European counterparts. Why is that? I mean, can we still cite Switzerland's historic strength behind this?
Yes, exactly. There is a very strong story and strong fundamentals that could enable a higher growth in Switzerland if we compare with the Eurozone. If we look at very rapidly the different sectors, consumption has been very strong and quite resilient, which benefits from a low level of unemployment rate. We have a strong performance in terms of exports. The Swiss economy is widely opened to the worldwide economy, and also investment from the corporate sector is also very important to generate a high level of productivity, and we also benefit from a high level of research and development. All these factors give very strong fundamentals if we compare with the Eurozone.
Now, looking kind of at the negative slightly as well, we are aware of these repeated risks of a housing bubble within the Swiss housing market. And most recently, it was stated that the mortgage market was in fact now too big to fail. The Swiss economy was again recently voted one of the most expensive economies in the world. Is there the risk that Switzerland is almost starting to outprice itself? And how does the recent rejection of what would have been at the highest minimum wage price in the world, how does this all tie in?
Okay, if we just made a rapid statement about this minimal wage, because the final vote of the Swiss population has been to reject, in fact, this proposal. The level of these minimal wages has been calculated relative to the price of rents and the housing market. So it explains why it looks out of the Swiss boundaries so high, but this is in relation with the high level of prices of the housing sector. But more specifically about the housing sector, the SNB, as a Swiss national bank, has made a lot of statements about the risk of any bubble in the housing market, and has made, as you mentioned, a lot of recommendations for the commercial banks in order to try to moderate their supply of credit and just perhaps to go back to more normal prices in terms of housing. So, and we have seen recently that these measures have taken some positive effects. That is to say, the prices in some locations, as for instance Geneva, has slowed down a bit, and we have also seen a lower level of transaction. But what is interesting is, as you know, Switzerland is a very small country if we compare with the worldwide level of a Eurozone, for instance. And that is to say, the idea of the housing market is not only a monetary market, not only coming from the banking sector attitude, of course, but this is also a thinking of how to manage the development and the urbanization process of the big Swiss city as Geneva, Lausanne, Zurich, and so on. So this is three levels of thinking about how to think about the future of the Switzerland, not only the monetary part, but also more long-term thinking about urbanization process.
I just want to come back to that GDP figure for a moment. A big driver behind it was a higher number of Swiss exports. How would you characterize Switzerland's business and economic interaction with what is still a recovering Eurozone?
Yes, the performance of the export sector has been very tremendous during the first quarter, 2.7% rate of growth, which is quite impressive. Of course, the Swiss economy is largely dependent of its major neighbor, which is Germany. When Germany is okay in terms of activity, we are expecting this year a 2% rate of growth. So it's not a surprise that we could expect also a 2% rate of growth for the Swiss economy. But what is also more important is that the Swiss, as mentioned at the early briefing, is that the Swiss economy is widely open to the world. That is to say, it has benefited a lot of the a globalization process. That is to say, when the US is doing well in terms of activity, when the China economy or the emerging countries are doing well in terms of activity, the Swiss economy, thanks to its productivity gains and also its high level of competitiveness, benefit also from this higher level of worldwide activity.
I wanted to finish up just with a look at the Swiss franc. Now, the Ukraine-Russia tension was largely thought to have played out massively on the Swiss franc as a safe haven status currency. Yeah. With a new president-elect in place, with tensions beginning to ease now, how do you see this playing out in the Swiss franc's future?
Yes, of course, you're right, absolutely right, to mention that we benefit from this very stable political environment. So when some trouble exists in other countries, there is some capital inflows that come into Switzerland and into the Swiss francs to be protected against any geopolitical risk or major political risk. So at this point of time, with the easing tensions we see in this region and perhaps in other geopolitical areas or geopolitical tensions, we could see some lower level in the Swiss franc regarding the US dollar. But speaking about the currency, the most important currency to focus is, of course, the euro versus the Swiss franc parity. As you know, the Swiss National Bank has put a cap on the euro to Swiss franc parity at 1.20%. So the big challenge for the Swiss economy at this point of time will be any changes coming from the ECB, which is expected to come in June, and if there is some reactions of weakness of euro versus the Swiss franc. At this point of time, we could say that the Swiss National Bank has still several monetary tools to deal with a potential decrease of the euro versus the Swiss franc, for example, in storing negative deposit rate on a short-term basis. That could be a useful tool. But at this point of time, my guess is that the ECB will perhaps have in mind more the euro-dollar parity rather than the euro-Swiss parity to manage its interest rate. So we do expect perhaps some easing of the euro versus the US dollar, but perhaps something more stable of the euro versus the Swiss franc parity.
Patrice, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your expertise with us today. Pleasure to have you back in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for right now, but do stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for all of the latest FX updates and analysis. For now, though, it's goodbye from me.